Hello, everyone. Today we'll be talking about Susan Wolf's article on meaningfulness, a third dimension of the good life. So let us begin. Um, so um, Wolf begins by pointing out that there are two dimensions of the good life, that's what she calls them, that are obviously worth pursuing. One of them she calls happiness, and people spend a lot of time talking about what makes one's life happy as obviously something worthy to be pursued, something that makes one's life valuable, worth having, or making it part of what makes one live the good life. And the other one's morality. And obviously being virtuous is part of what it is to have a good life. And she thinks both of those categories are definitely part of the good life. But there's this third element that is many times not discussed, and it should be. And she calls it meaning. And here's her actual account. She begins by giving us like her conception of this third dimension of the good life. And here's what she says. Meaning arises when the subjective attraction meets subjective attractiveness. That's like her cool slogan. In other words, one's life is meaningful insofar as one is gripped by or excited by things worthy of one's love, and one is able to do something positive about it. So she's going to say that for your life to be meaningful, it has to be fulfilling in a particular way. So from a subjective perspective, it has to feel satisfying. And we'll spell out what that means. But it has to feel satisfying from the first person perspective, but also must match the world being objectively valuable. And it's the match between the thing that you're doing being objectively valuable and your subjective attraction for it, or subjective feeling fulfillment for it. It is that alignment that is meaning. Your life is meaningful, not merely when you have the subjective attraction or personal sense of fulfillment, or not merely when what you're doing is objectively worth doing, but rather when those two things align. So the alignment is the meaning. So meaning arises from loving objects worthy of love and engaging with them in a positive way. So a person's life can be meaningful only if she cares fairly deep about some things, only if she is gripped, excited, interested, engaged, or loves, as opposed to being bored or alienated from most of what she does. And this is the subjective element. So one's life is meaningful only if one of the conditions is that you care deeply about what you're doing, you're gripped, you're engaged, you have this passion for it. You find this sense of fulfillment what you're doing. And the contrast with that sense of fulfillment, that interest and engagement, is the feeling bored and alienated. If you have this job and you think like, oh, I have to go do that again, and like the only reason you do it is because you get a paycheck at the end of the week. If you're bored or alienated from your activities, that's a sign that that's not a very meaningful life. At least that aspect of your life is not very meaningful. So she thinks that the subjective element of finding your passion and being excited about what you do is what makes one life meaningful. And she thinks that's pretty kind of straightforward. Like it's hard to disagree with that. When someone says part of what makes your life meaningful is that you find your passion, that you are moved by, interested in, and care about what you're doing, it's hard to say that's false. Like, yeah, that's a condition for meaningfulness. The question is whether that's sufficient for meaningfulness, and she's going to argue that it is not. Uh, anyway, so she thinks that you also must love something that is worthy of love. So in insisting that the requisite object must be worthy of love, however, this conception of meaning invokes an objective standard. Right? So she's making it explicit. It's not merely that you care a lot about something, but that something must be worthy of love, must be worthy of your love. And that's to appeal to something other than your love and even your beliefs about your assessment of the object. It must be valuable from a third person perspective, not merely your perspective. So not any object will do, nor is it guaranteed that the subject's own assessment of the worthiness is privileged. In other words, even if you think it's subjectively valuable, that's not enough for it to be objectively valuable. You can be mistaken. We all make mistakes. So in appealing to this objective standard, she's allowing for the possibility that you might think something is objectively valuable, but you may be mistaken. So let's talk more about that. Let's spell out what she means by that. And she thinks that she's providing the following kind of argument. She might think, look, how would you know like that a view is a credible view, is a good view? And she goes all the way back to Aristotle. She says, Aristotle gives us a model for thinking about how to philosophize that we should do. And in Aristotle called this endoxa. So for Aristotle, endoxa are the things which are accepted by everyone or by most people or by the wise. And this is not supposed to be, if you read this, it might sound like blind deference to the opinion of the masses, right? There's like whatever the masses say goes. But that's not what Aristotle means. Aristotle means something close to what some people nowadays call common sense. And it's not just what people believe, but those that are thinking correctly, that's what they believe. And most people have that capacity. Or the last qualification, by the wise. And Aristotle thinks, well, sometimes many people don't actually believe something, but if they were to spend enough time thinking about it, learning the right kinds of information and so on, they would come to believe it. So they would have to grow in wisdom to come to understand it, but like people in general could do that. So Aristotle is not just saying, again, defer to whatever the masses believe, but something like the kinds of beliefs that reasonable people upon consideration come to accept. That's the general category. That's the endoxa of Aristotle. Um, so why are we appealing to these things that wise people believe? Well, Aristotle says that's the legitimate starting point of inquiry. Philosophical inquiry begins by taking seriously the kinds of things that wise people or those who have spent enough time thinking about these things, the things that they believe. Philosophical inquiry need not conclude that people that believe these things are correct, but it is a fair starting point. Here's what Susan Wolf herself says. If a view can explain or support the common beliefs, or better, bring together into harmony the kinds of things that wise people believe, then that counts as an argument in its favor. So what she means is that we should go and talk to people that are intelligent, who have been thinking about this, who are committed about life, who care about meaning, and see what they say about what makes life worth value, what makes life meaningful. And then if we can come up with a theory of the meaning of life that does justice to those things, that harmonizes the things that those intelligent, wise people believe, the fact that our theory harmonizes and brings together the thing that wise people believe is an argument in favor of the theory. Might not be conclusive, but it's an argument, right? It's a reason in favor of it. Here are two things that wise people say about the meaning of life. If you go through an existential crisis, you don't know if your life is worth living, you don't know if you're doing the right thing, you don't know where to go. You might ask someone that loves you, that cares about you, who's wise, and they might tell you something like, find your passion, find what you love, find personal fulfillment, which is like it opposes the sense of emptiness and do that, right? So find your passion, find what moves you, what drives you, something that you care about, something that gives you a sense of fulfillment, and do that. And this first belief is kind of a subjective element, right? It's something like you look within yourself to see if you experience things in this particular way. And wise people say these things. Wise people also say something that seems at odds with that, or that seems to be completely other than that. And that is something like pursue something greater than yourself. Go and volunteer, be part of Habitat for Humanity, help end world poverty, help end this injustice system, volunteer for helping underprivileged kids and things like that. That's also something that wise people say. If you want a life that is worth living, that is meaningful, do good things in the world. And this is now an objective standard of meaning, right? It's no longer something about how you feel, but it's the way in which you affect the world. So these are the two kind of like beliefs that are typically put forth by wise people when they're considering the nature of the meaningful life. In Susan's account, she's going to say, my account brings them together in a cool way. But before she puts them together, she's going to talk a little bit more about each of the views that comes out of these suggestions and give some considerations for why they themselves cannot be enough. So let's call a view about the meaning of life the fulfillment view. And the fulfillment view is the view that says that the subjective sense of satisfaction with your life is all there is for a life being meaningful. So it's easy to see why someone would support this advice, like find your passion, do what you love. And find plausible the claim that being able to pursue a passion adds something distinctive and deeply to an aspect of the good life. So it's easy to see why find your passion, do what you love seems like a good advice. Doing what one loves gives one a sense of fulfillment as part of the story. It's contrasted with things like boredom and alienation, tiresome, finding what you do tedious and worthless. And when you find what you do boring, tedious, or worthless, there's this obvious sense of like that's not right. Like my life is not meaningful. So the opposite of that is the fulfillment, the finding your passion. And that seems attractive. And Susan points out that this fulfillment is not merely a sense of like transitory joy. It's not like when you're playing a video game and you're excited and you're like playing the video game and like, oh, this is cool. Fulfillment is deeper than that. And what is this deeper element? Well, it's more like a general sense of contentment, not just with the activity that you're doing at the time, but with the totality of your life, with the shape of your life. In video games, is a good example because a lot of us like playing video games is a good kind of way to pass the time. It's kind of exciting and fun. But few people, even those that enjoy playing video games, are content with seeing themselves like their lives being shaped by being a video game player, right? It seems that the feeling that you have about yourself when you see yourself as more or less just playing video games all the time is not one of fulfillment and contentment and joy, but rather a sense of like I'm wasting my time. Like this is something I can do on the side as a distraction, but this is not what defines me. It's hard to find a sense of fulfillment and joy with doing things like playing video games, though you can have the immediate like feeling of happiness at the moment. And this matters. The fulfillment view is not one that says, at the moment, do what feels nice, what feels pleasurable. The fulfillment view is think of the overall shape of your life and structure your life in such a way that you have this sense of satisfaction with the totality, with the overall narrative of who you are, the main values that shape your existence, the main things you care about that shape the story of who you are. And if you're satisfied with that, that's it. Like that's a meaningful life. So this is a kind of hedonistic view. It says that what is ultimately valuable is how you feel as a kind of pleasure. It's the value of is the value of the experience. And that's what matters for meaning in life. Susan Wolf has some problems with this, has some objections. She thinks that the fulfillment view, it's only part of the story, cannot be the whole story. So if a sense of fulfillment is the only thing that matters, and that's what the fulfillment view says, and that's all you need to have a meaningful life, then it shouldn't matter in the assessment of our lives what objects it gives rise to this feeling. In other words, if the only thing that matters is the subjective element, that you're satisfied with what you're doing, it shouldn't really matter what it is that you do that causes the feeling, just the having of the feeling. And a good example is the person obsessed with playing marbles. If they have the subjective feeling of fulfillment, then hey, their life is meaningful. But yet, it doesn't sound right. And here's some of the examples that Susan Wolf provides. Think of a life that is not just you do it at the side, but your life is structured, is dedicated to things like solving crossword puzzles or playing Sudoku games or smoking pot all day or playing video games all the time. Like that's what you do. Your whole life is structured for that. You go to work so you have enough money so you have time to do that, right? Everything's structured around, say, playing Sudoku games. Suppose that you do have a sense of fulfillment by doing that. Are you missing something? Is your life as meaningful as it can be? Someone says, of course you're missing something. There's something about the activities you're doing that it's problematic from the meaning of life perspective. Are you missing something? Yes, you are. And here's an example that is supposed to help bring this about. So think of Sisyphus. Sisyphus was condemned to push a big rock up a hill and then it goes down again and he does it again, right? Sisyphus is condemned to push a rock up a hill for all eternity. And that seems to be the paradigmatic example of a meaningless life. Why? Because he's forced to an endless repetition of a task that is boring, that is difficult, and that is futile. There's nothing objectively valuable about what he's doing, and he's doing it forever. He's not attaining anything. He's not. It's a futile, difficult, boring task, and he's going to do it forever. His life is worthless. His destiny is worse than death, is the thought. Suppose that we alter the story a little bit and we say that there's this benevolent God that sees Sisyphus and has pity upon Sisyphus and says, oh, it's too bad that Sisyphus has been, condemned in this particular way. I'm going to help him out. I'm going to help Sisyphus out. And this God bestows upon Sisyphus, let us suppose, a sense of satisfaction with his activities. So the activity of pushing the rock up the hill and then doing it again and again and again suddenly becomes, from a subjective perspective, satisfying. We have satisfied Sisyphus. Satisfied Sisyphus now has been, this sense of fulfillment has been bestowed upon them by a god. And now they see, like, they enjoy pushing the rock up and down the hill. Here's the question that Susan Wolf has. What should we think about Sisyphus fulfilled, the one that has a subjective feeling? Should we think that that's a meaningful life now, that he's not missing anything in terms of a meaningful life? And her assessment is no, that his life is better than it was before now that he has a sense of fulfillment, but there's still something significantly lacking. His task is still futile, is still difficult, is still pointless. That he enjoys it, it makes it better, but the task itself is still pointless, futile, and difficult, and endless. He's getting nowhere, and that matters for meaning, she claims. So the fulfillment view as the idea that the only thing that matters for meaning in life is that you're satisfied with the shape of your life cannot be the whole story. That's the conclusion. Let's look at the kind of the other extreme, the view that takes that second claim that if you want to have a meaningful life, go and do something good in the world. Let's take that one seriously and say that that's all you need to have a meaningful life. I do think you do good things in the world. So let's call that the larger than oneself view. In one of the observations that Susan Wolf makes is, well, the larger than life is a mere metaphor. Like, you don't mean like commit yourself to something that is bigger, as in the room in your house is bigger, and like you can commit yourself to cleaning it all the time. But that doesn't seem right. It's not like the size that is really the thing that people are talking about. Something about the importance of the value of the things you're committing to. So one possible way of reading it to make it more clear is something like, commit yourself to doing things that are more valuable or more important than just what's important for you, just yourself. So it seems that that's the kind of thing people are saying. Go and bring about things that are valuable objectively, that are not necessarily connected to yourself. There's something other than yourself, or things that are more important than yourself. And Susan Wolf says that's probably closer to what people mean, but as such, it can quite be correct, because it seems that a good way of going about fulfilling what this view recommends is by, say, committing to help your elder mom. Your mom is getting old and she needs some assistance, and you kind of spend many years just committed to taking care of her. Like that's a very altruistic, noble, virtuous thing for you to do. And it should be the kind of thing that this view, larger than oneself, should cover, right? Like that's exactly what they're suggesting. But then we shouldn't read it as something more important than yourself, because your mom is not more important than you. She's just as important as you. So Susan Wolf thinks, well, it maybe shouldn't be seen in terms of more important, but just something whose importance is not reducible to you. Something whose importance is other than you. So perhaps it is commitment to something other than the self that matters here, something whose value is independent from yours. And that's a way of being not selfish, right? That's a way of caring about something that's not ultimately reducible to what's good for you. And Susan Wolf thinks, yeah, that's probably what they mean. That's probably what this second account says. Do something whose good or value does not ultimately reduce to something that is good for you, something that is good for other people, not just you, or animals, the environment, something that is not you. So here's the question then. If that's the right reading, is this enough for a meaningful life? Suppose someone does this. She commits herself to doing something that is valuable independently of her own life. Is this enough for her life to be meaningful? And the response is, well, maybe. Like her life is now better in some important sense. But what if she's bored, unsatisfied, and even annoyed by the activities, right? She's trying to save the environment, but she hates the activities. She's tired, she's dissatisfied, she finds the work tedious. Does she now have a meaningful life? And the response is, well, no, at least things could be better. So the concentration on the being fulfilled, the fulfillment view, seems to be problematic if the objective value is not there. And here, the opposite seems to be the case. If you're concerned with, you're dedicated to something that is objectively valuable, that's good. But if you don't have the subjective sense of satisfaction that in doing the thing, something seems missing as well. So let's end here. We'll continue talking about Susan Wolf's view next time. Bye.